Hitler's Fixer, a profile of Martin Bormann, will now be slightly later than advertised at 11:25 after an extended news.
A seventh person has died following the Reading train crash. The full extent of the carnage became apparent today. The police say it's incredible that so many survived the collision.
I thought I was going to die because we couldn't see anything, and all I could feel was my body being dragged through the window.
It emerged an off-duty policeman tried to stop the train before it hit the car. Tonight there are calls for level crossings to be scrapped on high-speed lines. Also, the shock of war, another suicide attack on British troops in Iraq. Good evening. A seventh person has now died as a result of the Reading rail crash. The man who had been in a critical condition died this afternoon in hospital. Today, investigators began sifting through 300 tons of mangled metal. According to witnesses, the wreckage looked like it had been pulled apart like a Christmas cracker. It's all that's left of the intercity from Paddington to Plymouth after it ploughed into a car at a crossing. It's emerged an off-duty policeman saw the car stopping on the tracks. He tried to raise the alarm but was too late. Paul Davis is at the scene tonight. Paul.
Shuli, even at this hour, investigators and recovery teams are continuing their grim work down by the trackside. 2 bodies have yet to be recovered at the end of a day that has thrown up a disturbing possibility. Could this disaster have been a deliberate act of sabotage and suicide? A question investigation teams are still trying to answer as they work under floodlights tonight. Early this morning, the mist cleared to reveal a vision of destruction. This is what happens to a train when it leaves the track while travelling at almost 100 miles an hour. Looking at these broken coaches, it's perhaps hard to believe that only 7 people died as a result. Dozens of passengers were injured, of course, but from this devastation, almost 300 people walked or were helped away alive. This carriage was sliced in 2, one set of bogie wheels left on the track. All day, investigators have been trying to work out why the 535 from Paddington to Plymouth met with disaster. Almost all their questions now centre on a saloon car, the remains of which are scattered on the trackside. The car driver was one of those who died, but what was his vehicle doing parked on the track at an unmanned level crossing? But even at this early stage, it's clear that there are factors that set last night's disaster apart. Above all, the fact that an off-duty police officer drove up this lane last night, approached this crossing and saw that a saloon car was parked on the tracks just there. A car that remained on the tracks even when these barriers went down. The officer, realising that disaster was imminent, ran to this telephone and called for help, but he simply ran out of time. The officer's colleagues say he did all he could, but it was already too late to stop the train.
As he came towards the crossing, he saw a car stationary on the crossing. Obviously, that was a great concern to him. He stopped to see what was going on, and then the barrier dropped, the lights went. He realised there's an imminent danger of disaster, ran to the emergency telephone, but before he could get a response, a train came through and hit the car.
Was he able to make any contact with the driver of the car?
No, he wasn't. It was all over very, very quickly indeed.
This man, who lives a few hundred yards from the railway line, was one of the first on the scene last night.
I was standing looking at utter carnage, and I thought, there's no way there's just one person dead here. In fact, I'm amazed that such a small number of people did die, because it is such a scene of devastation.
Tonight, parts of a giant crane have arrived on site. More than 24 hours on, the investigators and the recovery teams are still on the trackside, searching for an explanation. Paul Davis, ITV News, Berkshire.
Well, today the amazing stories of survival began to emerge. "I thought I was going to die" was how this man described the experience. John Stace said he felt himself being dragged through a broken window and only the crush of bodies around him stopped him from slipping out completely. Philip Ray Smith heard his story.
Pictures of the worst of the wreckage. It's hard to imagine how anyone made it out alive, and yet make it out they did. John Stace was one of the survivors, and he's being treated here at the Royal Berkshire Hospital for terrible cuts. Even so, tonight he says he feels lucky to be alive. His was an amazing escape.
It was terrifying. I literally thought that was the end of, I thought I was going to die because we couldn't see anything, and all I could feel was my body being dragged through the window alongside the train with people on top of me.
John Stace survived against the odds. The 21-year-old student from London almost caught a different train, but got on the ill-fated 5:35 from Paddington to travel with his friends.
I could feel bodies going on top of me and being thrown from different places, and then I felt my arm go through the window because the glass wasn't there, and then I felt my head as well. I managed to pull my head back in, but my arm got dragged along. That's why it's got all the lacerations and stitches in it. Then as soon as we sort of came to and the train sort of came to a stop after smashing along, we all sort of shouted one another's names, heard one another, and then heard a lot more shouting, so we tried to get everyone to calm down and calm the situation.
It's incredible to think that John was able to walk out of this wreckage with his arm deeply lacerated. Even more incredible, he went back in, twice.
I and another friend went back in to try and see if we could help anyone else out. Well, one lady couldn't be moved, and we managed to get another lady out.
We're both very proud of him. That the one thing we learned last night was that he'd spent a lot of time helping other people, although he was injured himself. And yeah, obviously very proud, but most of all relief that he's come through it in one piece, or almost in one piece, and also that his friends are okay.
John's friends all escaped with minor injuries. He faces a long wait for his arm to heal, but he knows he was lucky.
I feel thankful that I'm still alive, so I walked away because I thought I was in danger of losing my arm, but I was scared of that, but some people obviously haven't made it, so I just feel lucky to have walked away alive.
As the questions and the inquiries begin, there have been calls for an urgent review of level crossings on high-speed rail lines. The type of crossing in last night's crash isn't thought to have contributed directly, but serious questions are now being raised about allowing cars to cross high-speed rail lines at all. Lawrence McGuinty has the details.
Accidents at level crossings are not unusual. Last year they killed 18 people, 3 of them at this crash near Evesham, when their minibus was hit by a high-speed train. But what is unusual about this crash is that the train was derailed and rail passengers were killed. The first time that's happened for 18 years. We now know, at least in outline, what happened in the Berkshire crash last night. The Plymouth train left Paddington at 5:35. Just after Reading, it triggered a signal on the track about a mile before the level crossing to activate the barriers. But the car that was hit was already on the track, according to an off-duty police officer who was in his car behind. He saw the barrier come down and rushed to the emergency telephone, but too late. Moments later, at 6:13, the train hit the car at full speed, derailing all 8 passenger carriages. Rail unions want an urgent review of all 8,000 level crossings in Britain, but train operators say it's too expensive to replace them.
As a generality, it's simply unrealistic to expect that one can radically change level crossings. I think the judgment would almost certainly be that the money involved should be spent on road safety, because in essence this was a road accident that spilled onto the railways.
Transport Secretary Alistair Darling was shocked by the crash, but was promising nothing.
We want to make sure we've got a safe railway, but the important thing here is to find out what went wrong in this case, why was this accident caused, and then we can decide what is best.
The question now for investigators is why 400 tons of train was derailed by a saloon car. Lawrence McGuinty, ITV News.
To other news now, there are reports that US-led ground forces have been involved in heavy clashes on the outskirts of Fallujah tonight. US warplanes have been bombing rebel-held positions around the city as they prepare for an all-out offensive. It comes after the Iraqi government declared a state of emergency in the country. Elsewhere in Iraq, 2 British soldiers were seriously injured in another suicide bombing attack on the Black Watch. Our Middle East correspondent Julian Mannion is with the regiment tonight.
Crouched in their Warrior armoured vehicle, men of the Black Watch battle group listen to urgent radio traffic. It's more bad news, and their shocked young faces say it all. Little more than a mile away, another suicide bomber has struck, and 2 British soldiers are badly injured. The wounded men, both in bomb disposal, were apparently standing outside their vehicle when the car bomb detonated. The attack took place as the Black Watch launched their most ambitious operation so far, a surge across the Euphrates River. The plan to set up sudden checkpoints and try to disrupt enemy movements on the rat runs in and out of Fallujah. As the warriors moved forward, the regimental piper walked across a key bridge, playing a lament in memory of the 3 soldiers killed on Thursday. There are few who now believe that they will be the last to lose their lives on this mission. Once again, the Ministry of Defence has had the harrowing task of informing the families of the men caught up in today's attack. And once again, questions will be raised about the wisdom of committing British troops, however well trained and equipped, to a part of Iraq where the conflict has no apparent end. The British casualties came as the Iraqi government declared a 60-day state of emergency. A fresh wave of insurgent attacks has shattered any illusion that Iraqi security forces can control the violence. Today, 3 more police stations were stormed and 21 policemen were dragged out and executed. In Fallujah, US forces have launched their heaviest air and artillery strikes for months.
If we get the word to move into battle, hurrah! Hurrah!
US Marines are trying to whip up their morale for an assault on the city which seems certain to meet fierce resistance. Julian Mannion, ITV News in central Iraq.
Within the last few minutes, a video has been released on an Islamist website which claims to show the suicide bomb attack which killed 3 British soldiers last Thursday. It's believed a group led by Abu Musab al-Zarqawi has posted the video. ITV News has decided not to show the content of the recording. Let's go live now to our senior political correspondent John Ray, who's in Downing Street tonight. John, these pictures are a chilling development.
They are indeed, Shirley. What the video apparently shows are the moments leading up to and including that explosion which took the lives of 3 Black Watch soldiers last Thursday. I suppose they show for sure not only what well-organised terrorists the British forces are dealing with, but also what able propagandists the government here is dealing with. This, of course, designed to turn the screw on Tony Blair at the beginning of what was always going to be a crucial week, not just for the dangers faced by the Black Watch, but also for that assault on the rebels in Fallujah. Here at Downing Street, the Prime Minister's aides know that he cannot afford to show a flicker of doubt, to flinch in any way, because that's what the rebels want the British to do. But contrast that resolute mood to some of the mood amongst some of the Labour backbenchers. One MP I was talking to tonight who just about supported the move of the Black Watch north, saying that if things go very badly in Fallujah over the next week or so, then Mr Blair could face, in his words, uproar in the Commons.
And it's against that background that Tony Blair is going to Washington this week to meet with President Bush.
That's right. That meeting, I suppose, reward for the Prime Minister for supporting President Bush in the war. It will confound those who hoped perhaps that Mr Blair might be more cautious in his dealings with the President. Those people, I don't think, understand the importance that Mr Blair places in that relationship. For all that, though, people will be looking for some payback for the Americans on this. Now, what particularly they want is some progress from the Americans, some commitment from the Americans to try to kickstart the Middle East peace process again. If Mr Blair got that, he could bring it back and say to his backbenchers that he was getting something out of the special relationship.
John, thank you. Football now. The much-hyped Manchester derby ended in a disappointing goalless draw. It's a major setback for United's title bid. They're now 11 points behind leaders Chelsea. Elsewhere, Fulham thrashed Newcastle, but Middlesbrough could only draw at home to Bolton. Nick Bashford watched the action.
Sir Alex Ferguson has written off Manchester United's Premiership hopes on the evidence of this latest setback. The 0-0 draw with City leaves them 11 points adrift of league leaders Chelsea. But Sir Alex believes the ref is also to blame. He turned down 2 strong penalty appeals, to Fergie's astonishment. City were forced to defend well. Only last-ditch defending kept United at bay. But the recent lack of goals is a big concern for Sir Alex. And the frustration proved too much for one striker, Alan Smith, dismissed for the 10th time in his career.
Alan Smith, second yellow. He's off.
Bolton came agonisingly close to claiming 3rd place in the Premiership.
Got his header, and it's been poked in by Pedersen.
They took the lead against Middlesbrough, but in a dramatic final few minutes, Bolton's goalkeeper was sent off. And seconds later, Middlesbrough snatched a point. It finished 1-1. And Rangers have closed the gap on Celtic at the top of the Scottish Premier League to just 4 points. They cruised to an emphatic 4-1 win over Livingston. Nick Bashford, ITV News.
And that's the way it looks tonight. Over on the ITV News channel next, the rest of tonight's news and sport, including all the latest on the Reading train crash. But from all the Weekend News team here, thanks for watching. Good night.
ITV National Weather, sponsored by Powergen.
Hello, good evening. Some mist and fog patches to watch out for overnight tonight. If you're out driving late tonight or tomorrow morning, take extra care. There will be some fog around, but no frost to worry about. A relatively mild night across most of Britain tonight. The thickest cloud and bits of drizzly rain probably in the south and east of the UK. There elsewhere, a lot of cloud, a bit misty, but it is quite mild. Temperatures no lower than around 4 or 5. And then for tomorrow, a typical autumn day, but grey and misty first thing in the morning. But it's going to be dry for most of us tomorrow, and it should brighten up a touch for many of us too. The odd sunny spell around, just 1 or 2 showers likely, and then most likely down in the south and east, East Anglia, southeast England. But for most of us, a dry day tomorrow, and a little brighter too after a dull and misty start.
Positive energy from Powergen.